I think the biggest question and complaint I've received on Elder Scrolls Online is, why are the graphics bad? Now, before we get into that, we have to define the word bad in this context. When gamers are presented with the concept of good graphics or AAA graphics or next-gen graphics, they picture things like Thief or The Witcher or, in this specific case, Skyrim. Then they use these games to compare whether a new game has good graphics or not. The core issue with this comparison is that different games on different platforms require different parameters. You wouldn't compare Mario on the Wii U to Mario on the Game Boy, just like you wouldn't compare the PS4 with the PS Vita. The fact that the platforms is a portable one means that they can't make it as strong as a home console or a desktop. You see, size matters. And just like there are reasons why a mobile game will not be as strong as a home console game, there are reasons why an MMO will not have as much graphics as a single player game. So what are these differences? Pretty simple really. You see, size matters. When you play a game like Thief, the world is small. Your computer or console only needs to load and simulate a much smaller world. The smaller the numbers of things to process, the more detail we're allowed to put into it. But we know this already. The question is, how do big worlds like Skyrim do it then? The way games like Skyrim do is by limiting its processing to areas that you can actually see. When you're playing around Whiterun, the only areas that are actually loaded and simulated are the areas around Whiterun, and everything else gets its quality lowered, to the point where it will just be simply non-existent if you get far enough. The game removes the areas of the game that it knows you will not see, so that it doesn't have to process it and simulate it. Why do you think the cities on Skyrim are on a different load screen? Loading all the people in the city plus the outskirts would make the game lag like crazy on the consoles, and most importantly, it would be completely unnecessary. An MMO cannot do this, or well, yeah, technically it can, but it is a lot more complicated. Things that are happening away from your view range is still happening and need to be processed by your computer, since, after all, it does affect your game. People wonder what would happen if Skyrim were co-op or multiplayer. Well, if it were, it would mean that the game would have to load a lot more scenery, since it would have to make sure that the areas surrounding both players would be of high quality. Sure, there are a lot of ways to solve that problem, but that's the developer's prerogative. Now, this is just one of the two reasons, and it's not even the biggest one. The biggest reason, however, is the player character. See here, when you're playing by yourself and a couple of NPCs, your computer only really needs to load the scenery, of course, around you, and maybe 4 or 5 enemies at once. Honestly, it is very rare for you to find yourself in a situation in a game where you will have 20 or 30 things happening at the same time in a video game. Even if the game like Grand Theft Auto, most NPCs only really need to do the same thing over and over, and you can only have so many civilians walking on the screen at any point in time. Even on the craziest moments, it doesn't even compare to what you see on MMOs. This is an example of what would happen in an MMO if it had Skyrim's graphics. You can see how my computer can handle 5 bandits, but how it starts to lag more and more the more bandits I add to my game. I have a pretty good computer, which means that I can handle having this many bandits just kind of chilling here. Now, the reason it can handle it, however, is because the bandits are sitting still without doing anything. The game and my computer do not need to analyze what they will do, nor does it need to process what their actions are going to affect the world. But as soon as I aggro them, you see a huge spike in lag. The computer now needs to process their moves and actions and their repercussions. But now, this is where it gets really interesting. You would think that if they were sitting still doing nothing, that my computer would have an easier time dealing with this many bandits. Now check this out. If I kill the bandits, my computer's speed drops down to a halt. This is what would happen in an MMO. The game is currently analyzing what items the bandits had, the probability of what items I should get from them, their stats, etc. Not just that, but suddenly I can interact with their bodies, with every single one of them. All this, coupled with the fact that every single one of these 155 bandits look awesome as hell, is just too much for a computer. Could you imagine having upwards of 100 people with this much graphics just running and moving and jumping and looting and trading and equipping all in front of your screen? What about the entire zone? Your computer just wouldn't be able to handle it. I know mine can't. Can yours? The reason MMOs don't have the same graphics as single-player games do is simply because our computers wouldn't be able to handle it. Loading so many characters would be too harsh on our computers, just like cell phone games are in their own graphic category, as well as handheld consoles, as well as home consoles, as well as desktops. MMOs are special in their own way. Does this still mean that Elder Scrolls Online has horrible graphics? I beg to differ. I think it looks great.
you.